Okay, Toby, I think you can start.
Okay, so I'm going to get started now. Let me just, okay. Hi, everybody. And my name is Toby Glick. And on behalf of the Inclusion Committee at Congregation Beth Shalom, I'd like to welcome you to our second annual program dedicated to inclusion, a conversation about creating a community of belonging. As you know, today's program was rescheduled from February when we became aware that we were competing with the Super Bowl. So even though February is designated Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, JDAME, in reality, every month and every day, we have the obligation and we have the opportunity to create an environment where all people, regardless of physical, social, cognitive, or developmental challenges, feel comfortable and can participate fully in the life of our congregation. We're so privileged tonight to have two remarkable speakers who are deeply involved, albeit from different perspectives, in enhancing the ability of each person to feel welcome in their community. So Dori, Kirshner, would you wave? That's Dori. And Lisa Schulman, if you would wave. Dori Fruman Kirshner has served as Matan's executive director for over a decade. Under Dori's leadership, Matan has shifted from a local direct service organization in the New York metro area to one which significantly impacts the field of Jewish disability inclusion across North America. By training communal leaders and educators, creating original curricula, and conducting community consultations, Matan is building the capacity of individuals and communities to be systematically and holistically inclusive of all of its members. Prior to coming to Matan, Dori worked at the UJA Federation of New York for 7 years in both planning and fundraising capacities. She began her professional career at the Salman Schachter School of Manhattan. Dori holds a Master's of Arts in Education from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America and a BA in Sociology and Judaic Studies from Emory University. She serves on the boards of the Salman Schachter Day School at Bergen County and Camp Young Judea Sprout Lake. Dori is a sought-after national speaker on the issue of Jewish inclusion and has published articles and op-eds in dozens of publications such as the New York Jewish Week and A Jewish Philanthropy. Dr. Lisa H. Schulman is a graduate of Brown University and the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. She is board certified in pediatrics, developmental and behavioral pediatrics, and neurodevelopmental disabilities. She's professor of pediatrics at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Dr. Schulman is the interim director of the Rose F. Kennedy Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center at Montefiore Hospital and the director of autism services at the program. Dr. Schulman also directs the Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental and Other Disabilities grant through Maternal and Child Health Bureau. She is the principal investigator of the New York State Spark grant through the Simons Foundation. From 2016 to 2019, she served as the Centers for Disease Control Act Early Ambassador to New York State. She currently serves on the Autism Executive Committee of the AAP Council on Children with Disabilities. Her clinical and research interests include early identification of autism, overcoming healthcare disparities in autism diagnosis, and follow-up on children with an early diagnosis of autism. And last, but certainly not least, she's a member of Beth Shalom, which is wonderful. Retired now, I worked for many years as a school psychologist, chairperson of the Committee on Preschool Special Education, and school consultant. For my entire professional life, I've been deeply engaged in inclusion and accommodations so that all children have the support they need to be successful. Beth Shalom's focus on inclusion began some years ago when Lisa Schulman and I noted that while Congregation Beth Shalom is a wonderful, friendly, welcoming, and helpful congregation, we didn't hear mention of the concept of inclusion. Given our backgrounds, we were initially alert to the needs of some children. We wanted to raise awareness and started with a well-attended Shabbaton session. Eventually, Lisa, Reuben Rotman, and I made a presentation to the Board of Trustees. After that, a more inclusive inclusion committee was formed and a questionnaire was sent to the Beth Shalom community regarding their needs. As a result, recommendations, both short and long-term, pertaining to adults and children, have been made to Rabbi Pitkowski and the executive committee. Many have been implemented, such as large print Chumashim and Sidurim, more working hearing devices in the sanctuary, closed captioning at Zoom meetings and programs, quiet areas for adults and children who need space, and dedicated areas in the synagogue for people with mobility issues. We believe that these actions have raised awareness at Beth Shalom and that we are closer to our goal of having inclusion be a part of everything that we do. The members of the Inclusion Committee, in addition to Lisa and me, are Reuben Rotman, Sandra Brawarski, Elaine Cohen, Jennifer Dugdale, Susan Goldman, Yaron Goldrich, Donna Greenberg, Whitney Blum, and Susan Greenbaum. There will be a comments and questions period at the end of the presentations, and please feel free to put your questions and comments into the chat. Elaine Cohen will be checking the chat during our program. And now, let me introduce Dr. Lisa Schulman.
Everybody. I was walking into shul yesterday, and here we are, 2 years into the pandemic, and there was a bat mitzvah going on, and there was a lot of activity going on in the sanctuary. I turned into the auditorium to hear the beautiful presentation on the 100th anniversary of the bat mitzvah, and that was pretty full too. And it wasn't just me, but several other people comment that the scene was bringing tears to their eyes. 2 years into the pandemic, I think we can all agree that we will never take community for granted ever again. It's precious. We've missed each other. Zoom is convenient. I mean, we can all multitask tonight while we're listening, but it's not the same as a virtual hug, a real conversation, a debate, meeting new people, sharing smachot, and also difficult times. So it's driven home what we've always known, but even more so, that Beth Shalom has been for many of us our second home. Now, imagine if your participation in community or sense that you were welcome was not a given. If even when there wasn't a pandemic, there were barriers, physical or attitudinal, that impacted you or one of your family members and their participation. And that's where Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, nicknamed or with the acronym JDAME, comes in. I want to read the definition of JDAME, which I've put forth before, but I think it's one of the best definitions I've ever read of anything. JDAME is a unified effort among Jewish organizations worldwide to raise awareness and foster acceptance and inclusion of people with disabilities and mental health conditions and those who love them. It is a call for action for all of us as we act in accordance with our Jewish values, honoring the strengths that we each possess. The goal is to unite Jewish communities worldwide to raise awareness and champion the rights of all Jews to be accepted, included, and welcomed in all aspects of Jewish life, like anyone else. It's that phrase at the end that I think captures the whole concept. I always like to kind of make the point that we're not just doing this because we're nice. And it's in line with our Jewish values, but inclusion makes us all better. Rabbi Lauren Tuckman, the first blind woman rabbi, stated it well when she said, "Our tradition understands that we are stronger when our differences are lifted up and celebrated as ways of being human that are and have always been with us. We are stronger when the richness of the tapestry of our lives and experiences are able to find their home in our communities." Or, in short, all of us are wiser, stronger, more creative than just a group of some of us. So you may be sitting back and saying, to be honest, I don't think it's the majority of this group who are self-selected to have come, but sitting back and saying, this is nice, this is great, but it doesn't impact me or my family. And I wanted to counter that with the numbers. So developmental and really all disabilities are prevalent and becoming more so. So when we think about children, disabilities and developmental disabilities are synonymous in many cases. Things like learning disability are present in 8% of children and ADHD in 7%. Autism these days is now 1 in 44 or 2.3%. Intellectual disability in 1%. Cerebral palsy in 0.5%. Visual impairment in 3% and hearing impairment in 0.2%. Pull those all together and you have disabilities present in about 20% or 1/5 of all children. Now let's look at adults. Actually, with our aging communities, disabilities are present in 1 in 4 adults. The top is mobility. Next, cognitive. Then hearing and vision. None of our families is not going to be dealing with this at some point. As a developmental pediatrician in practice for over 30 years, there's not a day that goes by unrelated to COVID that I don't hear from a parent or directly from a child or teen, which is even more painful, about a sense of isolation, a yearning to be included and welcomed in just everyday settings and experiences that come together to make a rich life. Birthday parties, sports leagues, dance classes, shul, the barbershop, a movie theater, a family reunion, at a restaurant. I hear regularly of children or their parents who tell me throughout these 2 years, their child has never gotten a phone call, never had a video chat, never played a video game with anybody else online. They've had no interaction. Nobody sought them out or responded to their efforts. I hear from families who feel very alone in managing the challenges that come with having a child or an adult with a significant disability who is different. And I see communities really stepping up in the most remarkable ways. In the Bronx, there are many small churches that are tremendous supports to the families we see. I've had scenarios where I've gotten a phone call from a pastor or minister of a child we've evaluated who said that the parent had given permission for him to call. And the minister asked, "We know that this family is struggling. Can we help?" And the minister came to the parent conference where we spoke about what the diagnoses were and what the recommendations. I've had neighbors come with other children and their families asking, what can we do to keep this child safe? And I've seen what a center like mine becomes for families. We become a kind of second home for them, where no one's judged, everybody's accepted as they are. But it doesn't feel as good because it's not inclusive, because we're just a special place. And so I'm always touched when the church is the second home. The community center is the second home. Beth Shalom is such an amazing community, educated, active, vibrant, family-oriented. But there are people at the margins, not fully able to participate or feel welcome. At baseline, one way to assess how inclusion a community is and whether they've addressed the barriers to participation and made people of all types feel welcome, bringing their whole selves and families. If that's the case, we would expect to look around and see those prevalence numbers among our wonderful Beth Shalom community. We'd see 20% of the children have a need. We'd see 1 out of 4 adults who are in the building as we more and more open that building and see them coming back, have a set of needs. This feels like a rare opportunity to recommit ourselves to inclusion as we welcome everybody back, everybody. So that's where tonight's program comes in. The Beth Shalom Inclusion Committee planned it in honor of J-Dame and invited Dori to help us think about and consider our next steps in making our community more inclusive, focusing tonight on those with disabilities. We invited Dori to help reignite our drive and our practical efforts as a community to, and I'm using her phrase here because it so rings true, get to yes when it comes to creating an inclusive community for all. So I'd like to invite Dori to join me now. And my first question for you, Dori, is tell us about Matan.
Okay, so I'm happy to do so. I do not want this program to end without my saying, I am so honored to have been asked to be part of this program. I am a longtime admirer of the Beth Shalom community. There are tons of people that I said hi to individually, in the chat. And I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation that you all are gonna have, but please, please, please know I'm always happy to discuss. This is my favorite topic. And I just want to thank in particular Abby for making everything happen. technologically, in terms of communication and marketing. And also to Toby and Lisa, who I honestly feel have become friends. We're going to meet up in real life soon. Every meeting we've had has been virtual, but we're going to change that. But I really mean this when I say that I've been an admirer, but this, sort of raises that up, because a shul that knows what to do and then says, let's get better at it. Let's keep working on it. And let's do this. Let's open the net a little bit wider so that we can all be part of this journey together, is actually, the right recipe for becoming a true community of belonging. So you asked me about Matan. I know Toby said some of it before, but I will tell you that Matan was created by a woman named Meredith Englander Polsky. She grew up in Spring Valley in Rockland County, and she had an experience as somebody towards the end of college. She was a Rosh Hashanah, a unit head at a camp, and she was in charge of the youngest kids in camp. And there was a young boy who she had grown very attached to within the first week. But because of various challenges that he had, both behavioral, some learning, some social, the camp decided, this is all the way back in like 1997, that this boy was asked to leave. It was decided that he needed to go elsewhere. And she was devastated by this. And she said that summer, she and this boy wrote letters back and forth. And when the fall rolled around, she called a friend who was employed at the day school where this boy was enrolled. And she said, how's he doing? And the answer was, I don't know, he was asked to leave. And she said it was like not only a punch in the gut, but that it was, sort of like, wait, Jewish camp, Jewish day school, how is it that my Jewish community, our Jewish community, is deciding who can and can't have access to those environments? That it felt very arbitrary and unfair. And it was sort of like, how could this be the case? So she started Matan with a dream of exactly, Lisa, what you just said, of really trying to get to yes. And that's how I describe it, but really sort of being able to say, like, okay, we may not, do it perfectly, but we're going to try. And we're going to be partners in this together and not make a unilateral decision without discussion, etc. So that was over 20 years ago when Matan was first started. It was started as a direct service, really in the New York area, the tri-state area operation. A lot of JCCs would have a Matan class. It was sort of one of many things that people could do at their local JCC, was get a Jewish education where judgment was not only withheld, but that it was kind of like what you were saying, Lisa, about your center. It was this safe haven place for kids who were not being accommodated, supported, really allowed to be in other places. And what we noticed was that after the first however many years, where we gave people not only a Jewish education, but helped with the B'nai Mitzvah process that was appropriate for each child, worked with clergy, we gave parents a sense of a connection to Judaism and to the Jewish community as well. But what everyone really wanted, both those of us that worked at Matan and the families, was more access, more yes. And so there was a real desire on the part of a lot of people to try to find a way back in to the Jewish community. So around the 10-year mark of Matan, we pivoted. I know it's like such a COVID word at this point, but that's really what happened. We sort of rebooted and we became a training operation, because we decided that if the people who had been saying no, the educational leaders of day schools, of early childhood centers, of JCC programs, you know, for youth, et cetera, if those people got edified in awareness, in tools and systems and protocols, and even help and support, you know, from people at Matan who actually could help, they could probably get much closer to yes. So that's what we did. And for the past, you know, however many years, that's what we've been doing. But something else evolved, and that is that whole organizations, not just the educational leadership, said, we all want to be part of this, you know, solution-oriented process. We all have a responsibility to not be part of the problem, you know, but to be part of the solution. And so now what we do is a lot of consulting across the entire country. A lot of times we're hired by federations that say, we have a program here, we have a shul there, and we have an amazing cancer who does the X, Y, or Z, but there's nothing that sort of brings everybody together systemically in order for us to be more inclusive across the lifespan. Lisa, you were talking a lot. I mean, this is your life's work is pediatrics, but we all know that people age, and people age out of a system that has a lot of support, you know, for people with disabilities and challenges. Then what? And the Jewish community, quite frankly, needs a lot more sort of, you know, incentive and collective sort of like tipping point, you know, like just becoming a mass together to worry about, instead of cradle to grave, we call it babies to bubbies. But really, like, what is the life, you know, happiness? Where's the joy for everyone? And how can we make that a possibility? So that's what Matan does. What I would say to any Jewish community that I am speaking to ever is I have on my cork board for the past, I don't know how many years, over a decade, a sheet of my favorite reasons textually, both from Genesis, Pirkei Avot, Martin Buber, why this is such an important piece of how to be a Jewish community. Making sure that everyone's dignity is as important as our own, not judging what the container looks like, but by the merits of what's in that container, and so on. And so I feel that Matan plays a really beautiful role for reminding and empowering, advocating and educating, so that we as a Jewish community can be as inclusive as possible.
Dori, take a step back with us. How did you get involved in this organization?
Okay, so some of you know my background. Joanne Palmer was really fascinated by, I will tell you that I'm a third generation Southern Jew. I don't sound like it, but I would say that one of the themes of my life, I mean, it sounds sort of a little dramatic, but it's true, is that I really, really know what it's like to feel other, or to not feel as, let's say, included or as welcomed. My dad is from Chattanooga, Tennessee. My mother's from Shreveport, Louisiana. I was born in Memphis and grew up in Shreveport, Baton Rouge, and then we ultimately settled in Houston. I went to a very, very great, excellent prep school that was non-sectarian. But it was really on the weekends where I found my joy and my people, and that was within the Jewish community. And so I knew from a very young age that it was something not to be taken for granted, kind of what Lisa was saying, as we're coming out of the crisis of the pandemic. Like, I loved my Jewish community. I craved my Jewish community. And for some people not to have access to that is absolutely, it's unimaginable to me. And so I think that when I had the opportunity, I was first a day school teacher, as you guys mentioned, and then went to work at UJ Federation. Matan was one of my grantees, and I called them up when they were a brand new organization and said, this is so needed. I don't understand how we functioned as a Jewish community so long without something like this, but we have so much to do and we can only give you X, Y, or Z from UJ Federation. I love what you're doing, and I wish you luck, etc. And many years later, I had the opportunity to come and work at Matan, and it was an easy place to find my purpose in. So that's how I got to Matan.
Can you give us some examples of why do communities contact Matan?
Okay, so it's a really good question. Sometimes we hear from someone who is either a parent who really needs to find the right either Jewish education, that's sort of outside of school, like either a bar bat mitzvah process and journey, or they want something meaningful in terms of Jewish education, but they know that their child can't be effectively served wherever it is that they live. I mean, we have military that live in Germany that have contact Jewish military that say, can you help? We live around no Jews, and Zoom is everything now. But I just mean that, sometimes it's resources are few and far between, and other times it's because parents or education directors or whatever the scenario is want help with one scenario, one person, one process. Sometimes there are whole synagogues that get in touch with us and say, we've been really good at focusing on one aspect of synagogue life, and that is, I'm just using it as an example, we created an inclusive Hebrew school experience, but it stays sort of contained or siloed. How can we, as a community, start to integrate those same values and best practices into our entire shul system and make this about all of us and all ages and stages? And other times we hear from, like I was saying before, whole communities. So I was going to give the example of Rochester, New York. In Rochester, most of the Jewish community lives in one area, and there are multiple shuls. There are actually at least 2 day school. I mean, it's a very vibrant, small, but vibrant community. And they basically, as a whole, contacted us. They were our very first community consultation, and they said, we know in theory that we're inclusive, but we don't know where to begin. And could you come and observe and meet with people and take a look at what we have and maybe what we need? And we said, yes, that would be, a gift for us to see something in a holistic kind of way. And what we ended up recommending as a first foray for the community was, we said, we're going to give you, which is what we do to this day. It was a document. It's a paper. I call it the roadmap, but it's really a 5 to 7 year plan for a community to incrementally work its way to being as inclusive as possible. And that means everything from Jewish education to social and recreational programs. It means we spoke to the JFS and the JCC and the senior home. It was really much more than a senior home. It had tentacles in all parts of the community, both vocational and residential and training and social and recreational and so on. And the truth is that we worked with them in one way or another, probably for at least 5 years. For instance, we said to them, what your community really needs is awareness, because I think people are assuming that they understand disabilities. And in fact, there are many, many hidden disabilities. It's better now. This was 10 years ago when we did our first consultation, I think, but it's better now, but the stigma is still there, whether we're talking about, behavioral differences, physical differences, traumatic brain injuries, and it's people that need help with transportation. I mean, there's so many different kinds of ways that people are impacted by disabilities, and what the community is aware of in terms of how easily they could connect the dots to make things more accessible. First, you have to start with awareness. So we recommended to them that they create a speaker series. We said, pick, once a quarter, do some kind of fabulous speaker, invite the entire community, and with every single lecture, the community came out in droves, more and more and more. And eventually people started saying, I never thought about X, Y, or Z. I never thought about, I happen to work at the residential place. I never thought about how our vans sit dormant for so many hours, and we could be helping shuttle other members of the Jewish community to appointments that don't live in our residence, and things like that. So the truth of the matter is that with more awareness comes, Toby, I think you were the one who said this the other day, consensus. And then it becomes a shared value and effort of a community. And that's really what you're striving for, because at that point, if everyone does feel that they have skin in the game, it can become, a place where the culture and the mindset are such that we're really living those Jewish values of really seeing the dignity in every single person, the gifts that they bring, and providing opportunities and taking out barriers that are there for people. Some of the other communities that come to my mind, we recently consulted with the Atlanta Jewish community, and in Atlanta, it stopped during the pandemic, but they have re-engaged. There is an adult Jewish study, Melton. It's an adapted Melton curriculum for Jewish adults, some young adults, some not as young adults. I just had a big birthday, so I don't know where, anyone calls young or not young, it doesn't matter. The point is that there was enough of a sense that we in Atlanta have this fabulous Melton program to offer. Why can't we make this an offering for, they hold it at the JCC in Atlanta, for adults with developmental disabilities and so on. And it is, I just had coffee last week with the executive director of Melton because they want to replicate that program in other places. So the truth is by, start somewhere. Start with a speaker series. You can start with a Melton class. You can start, it really doesn't matter. but start. I mean, like, and I know, Toby, you had said that your shul has started. It's not that I'm preaching to the choir, but what I'm saying is that you just literally, I always, this is my expression, how do you eat an elephant? Like inclusion is such a big concept. Well, you do it one bite at a time, just like anything else, right? So we all just need to figure out in our communities what's going to work best. I have another example, if I can. They gave me permission to say the name, but Rodef Shalom in New York, in Manhattan. Large Reform synagogue, old synagogue, lots of history and tradition, etc. One of the things that they worked on probably almost a decade ago was there was a mom of an adult daughter who was eventually going to finish, her, let's say, experience in the public school system. She was going to age out. And what she realized was that during that entire time where she got her daughter what she needed, Jewish education, Jewish community, Jewish joy, joyful Judaism, and just that love that she had grown up with just had not been anything that she had the time, the wherewithal, etc., to give to her daughter. So she approached actually the rabbi's wife at Rodef Shalom, and together they created, along with a couple of the rabbis there, a pilot, a trial, musical, experiential, interactive, sort of come as you are kind of service. I think they started with Hanukkah, just a Hanukkah Friday night, Saturday morning. I don't even remember what it was. They called me while they were putting it together, and I basically said, have you ever heard of Music for Autism? No. So they worked with other organizations to really understand best practices and what would and could be the most successful. They advertised both to members and non-members. Sorry, that's my Alexa talking. I unplugged it. So we don't have to hear it again. Sorry. I have kids cooking upstairs. So basically, this one service that was really like a trial, an experiment, etc., has evolved into pre-pandemic, because I don't know, like who's showing up now on Zoom. I can't tell you, but they literally got hundreds of people every single time. And it wasn't just for people with families, who have people with disabilities. It became a really, really beautiful community in and of itself that was open to all. And another synagogue across the park said, we want to do a similar thing. All the Chagim, the holidays that you're not doing services, those special Shirenu services, we're going to host them at our place, and everyone is welcome, and so on. And they have literally become, just from, like I said, this one parent with just a desire to really find meaning for her daughter who had been left out, or who she had not really focused on in terms of the Jewish education part, has really created something that works for a lot of people. And now they were in touch with us just last week because they'd like to expand to youth, social and recreational, social justice programs, etc., both for neurotypical teens and young adults, and also those with disabilities. Okay, so sorry, I see there's some great questions in the chat. Lisa, do you have?
Okay, I see the first one from Peter Glick is, are there some examples of what a congregation looked like before and after getting to yes? You've been giving us some examples. Something else come to mind?
So I will say, this is a great question. And Peter Glick, I love your wife. Just want to say hi. Looking forward to meeting you too. I hear about you a lot. So I would say, and I do feel really strongly, when I first started at Matan, I had the pleasure of meeting, he's now emeritus, a fabulous, creative, innovative rabbi named Dan Grossman. He had a shul near Princeton. And as a young rabbi out of seminary, before he would sign his contract, basically said to the board or whomever was hiring him, I know you guys are about to undergo a renovation. Can I just like put in my 2 cents about what I think the shul should look like, etc. And it's a lot of the things, Toby, that you've said you guys have done recently. Large print sidurim, helping to augment and amplify sound for people. Dan wanted an ark that would be accessible, and he figured out, really low budget ways of just saying, like, instead of building it this way, can you just lower it a little more? Or can you make sure that a ramp gets added on, but permanently, or things like that? Because they were really in the midst of, renovating anyway. So those were some of the things that it didn't add on any cost. They were already going to do it. But what Dan did for the first 10 years after the physical changes were made is he became a place where it was known that anyone with any issue would not only be welcome, but they would be well supported. He hired people for the Hebrew school. He hired people to help advise him, on what could be done better and differently. And what he did was he created almost like a buddy system within the shul, is what I would say. And so people knew that they could turn to their buddy to help get whatever it was that they needed. So there were people who had not been to shul in a very long time, who, now, this was a Reconstructionist shul. I know Beth Shalom is, Shomer Shabbat, for the most part or whatever, but what they did was they made sure that if you needed a ride, you knew who to contact, and they would help, get you to shul. That it was an ethic, a value to figure that out. When kids would finish in the Hebrew school, they were given, all people, whether they were neurotypical or had special needs, they were given the opportunity to be madrichim, or supports, in the Hebrew school classrooms. So I know that Beth Shalom doesn't have a Hebrew school, but just thinking about even the visibility of people with visible disabilities, helping out in different services, with babysitting, or different youth services. I mean, there's so many. When the pandemic, is fully over, there's so many opportunities to include people. I heard that this is something that does happen at Beth Shalom, but I think it could be even more, purposefully. Like I always say, inclusion by design, not by default. The whole thing about inclusion is really like planning and being proactive. Some of the other things, I just jotted down a bunch of, ideas in advance of this, but every single program that ever happens, whether it's on Zoom or in person, for Beth Shalom, there should be if you have any questions, if you need something, if there's something that we can do to make things more comfortable, more accessible for you, please call and then list a person's name, a human, a person, like not just a phone number, not just an email. Please, say who it is. I don't care if it's a lay person, if it's a professional, it doesn't really matter. And that person doesn't have to have all the answers. That person is just then responsible for trying to get answers and to help with those supports and follow up and get back to that person who needed, X, Y, or Z. The partnership that I know exists, because I asked about this in our conversations before, the inclusion committee is not just a composition of lay leaders. There are also, I think Whitney attends all the meetings. That partnership of lay and professional will forever be important when it comes to inclusion. Doesn't matter what the issue is, but one can't happen without the other. So that idea of communication, going both ways has to be, front and center when you're trying to make changes. This has to be a place where, things get relayed in real time and shared and worked on collectively. I will say, because it's sort of a tangent to this, the whole idea of providing some kind of, either like, I call it the feedback loop, but again, maybe the inclusion committee, puts a little line in your Likrat Shabbat, moving forward from this day on, that says, please, contact, again, Toby Glick, whomever, a person, if there's something that you feel, the shul could do to make things, more inclusive, et cetera. Again, it has to go somewhere. It has to be known that the inclusion committee and the clergy and the professionals all want to hear. And something that I tell communities a lot is to really, at least a couple times a year, create an opportunity to have like a focus group around inclusion. Now, I just want to say this is sort of an asterisk, okay? But I'm going to say something, it's not going to sound very profound, but I will explain it and hopefully it will have some meaning. I really truly believe that inclusion is inclusion is inclusion. What does that mean? It means you can't say that we're a LGBTQ plus friendly shul, but not for but not inclusive of disabilities. Or we welcome everyone except not, people at the margins because of interfaith issues. Basically what this journey is about is not only the type of inclusion that I do day in and day out, but it is really like the whole idea of lifting up the tent flaps and saying, we want to be the kind of community that welcomes everyone. And we're not going to always get it right. And there have been, I'm sure, mistakes made. And by the way, there still will be, unfortunately, because we're human. But this is a desire of ours to get from what is the reality now to what the ideal is. You'll never get there fully. But the whole point is that you're going to always be working on it. One last thing that I wanted to say is, I know at your shul, you are blessed with not only, a rabbi who cares deeply about lots of different types of inclusion, but you have a very, very engaged, bright, committed, community that, the joke about your shul is that, like, doesn't matter who leads, everyone can do, like everyone is so knowledgeable and so, so committed. And, this is like it's really like what Lisa was saying, it's a second home, hopefully, for most people. So it's not only, and you guys know this, it's not only the rabbi that needs to speak about inclusion. At Matan several years ago, when blogs were very in, because now it's podcasts, but when blogs are very in, we actually spent 3 years. We approached rabbis of every stream, Orthodox, conservative, reform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Conservative, I don't even, whatever. We asked each rabbi to write a blog that related to inclusion about every single parsha. We literally just contacted rabbi after rabbi after rabbi for 3 years. We did it. And so I'm quite convinced. I mean, I read up on Sav, before tonight. And I was just sitting there thinking to myself, there's so many rules around sacrifices and getting it right, et cetera. That's what Sav is about, right? And all I could think was, inclusion is not as, I don't know what the word is. It's not a proscription, it is much more about human beings, being there for other human beings and just trying your best. I mean, that's really, as opposed to like, this is right, this is wrong, that's not what, that is not how to get to an inclusive environment. It's about being planful and proactive and empathic, listening, and like I said, being ongoing and acknowledging that you're going to make mistakes.
Thank you. That was very passionate and inspiring. Can we pick your brain now on accommodations for people with dementia, especially on Shabbat?
Oh, that's a really good one. And I will tell you, I think Ruben is probably still on. I can't see everyone, but I think there are probably people that are much more knowledgeable about these, type of issues. Look, they have this saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because autism is going to look very different in each person with autism. And what I will say, that in my experience so far in life with people young and older who have cognitive impairments from dementia, Alzheimer's, there are all kinds of things. I have an aunt with MS that, because of the way she's affected, she has impairment of memory, so there are lots of different reasons that people struggle with these types of things, traumatic brain injury. What I would say is, and this is like true for almost anything, is I think that familiarity, repetition, patience, and the sort of, I don't know what the word is, almost like, being aware that the people who need to be asked this are the people that love and care about these people, because they will say, my mom needs X, Y, or Z in order to be, calm. Or, I take care of my aunt so-and-so, and I've noticed that she loves music. So as long as, there's music in whatever opportunity, she'll be great, et cetera. So the people that love and care for people with cognitive decline, let's call it that, because there's so many different reasons that it comes about. Hopefully they'll be able to guide you, but it's the same thing. If I had, a child with autism, or I do have a child with ADHD, she's very open about it. I can tell you, the top 5 things to do and the top 5 things not to ask her to do, because it's just not gonna work, and so I think that they call it the disability perspective. but it's really like, saying, okay, everybody needs something different. It's on us. It's on the rest of us to find out how we can help.
I think you're suggesting that this be one of our focus groups that includes family members and individuals with cognitive issues, and that we talk through and brainstorm about what would be an approach on Shabbat to be inclusive and welcoming and supportive of our population.
Yes. And I would
Wow.
say, I would say also make sure for all kinds of reasons that there is, like, it's known, it's been, sort of sanctioned and prepared, a spot for people, a space for people when they need to sort of regroup, maybe align sensory, needs or whatever, that there is a safe, quiet space for people who need that.
There are several questions in the chat about work you're doing with Jewish day schools around these issues. Do you work with Sinai schools?
Okay,
Tell us.
so, all right. So this is from Mona. Mona, thank you for the question. Hi, I've seen you on the screen all night. Are you related to Eitan? Yes?
I am his mother.
Okay. So I'm married to a conservative JTS ordained rabbi. So, and we both know Eitan very well. And Aderet went to Schechter, right? I know she's like grown up now or something. I don't know. But anyway, so thank you for the question. So do we work with day schools? So I will say, and I have no idea if she's still on here because I can only see about 5 people and myself, but Liav Shapiro is ensconced in the Solomon Schechter Day School of Bergen County. And I will tell you, I've been all over this country, and she's exceptional. And my 2 kids who went there are very different people and learners. And they were always well supported. And so in general, I don't do so much work with Sinai, but I'm a huge fan. And often if people send resumes my way, the Shefa School in Manhattan and the Sinai schools, no matter where they are, New York, New Jersey, et cetera, are the first places that I send resumes to, because I think both of those serve such amazing needs in the community. But my hope is that with the advent of Shefa and Sinai and a few other places, that day schools will continue to be like how Schechter Bergen is, which is we need to be edified to be able to support as many learners as we can. And again, that's a goal. It doesn't mean every single person that's the right environment for them. I'm a huge, huge, huge believer that there is such power in inclusive education. And I also believe that there is such power in self-contained scenarios, depending on what the family wants, what the goals are, and ultimately what the child or learner wants. It doesn't have to just be the child. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. And I will tell you that Jewish day schools, unfortunately, because I taught in a Jewish day school, my kids are still in Jewish day schools. There is so much that a day school has to worry about. This is one of the things that for a lot of day schools is being talked about, planned for, worked on, etc. But we could be here all day talking about the other issues such as affordability, excellent teaching, faculty, attracting, retaining. I mean, there's so many issues, STEM, the arts. There's so much that goes into day schools. I don't think there will be day schools if we don't address this. Like, I think that we won't have a system if we don't prioritize this. So we do some work with day schools. We did a huge consultation with a very, very large day school in New Jersey that's pre-K through 12th on my mantra to them was, how can you be academically rigorous while at the same time supporting as many different needs? Because in my eyes, the valedictorian may need some help, with and support. It doesn't, one does not cancel out the other. So I don't know if that answers your question, Mona. Liav said yes.
Well, I really appreciate what you're saying. I won't take up a lot of time, but I just think the issue of values is so crucial here. When my kids went to Schechter in Boston, they were in the 80s. Okay, I grant you, we weren't where we are now, or
In
trying
Newton,
to get to.
in Newton.
Yeah.
Okay.
They weren't able to support kids with special needs, and there was a lot of bullying going on of kids who had
Right.
various learning disabilities. And they just said we're not set up for that. The smart kids, yes, the average kids, yes, but these special needs kids, we can't handle it.
Right.
I know we've come a long way from there, but I do believe that the integration of the shul and the school thing is so important in terms of the whole values message of the community.
That's
I
true.
really respect what you're doing here very much.
It's
very
true.
appreciative of what you've done.
Thank you. And Boston got a lot better. Boston's one of my go-to communities. No, I'm serious. Just so that you know, it became, thank God, a different place with Barry Schrage basically saying all day schools have to be accessible. How can we make that happen? And that was Gateways.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm?
We all like to feel like we have some kind of next steps, action items. What should we do next?
Okay.
That's okay.
So I'm going to try really hard to share my screen.
Okay.
We're gonna, pray to the tech gods that I can handle it. Hold on one second. I'm gonna. All right.
No, I'm gonna turn this on.
Okay, I'm just gonna look at. All right, I'm gonna go. I prepared some slides. I am going to try to share the screen. Let's see. It might actually happen. Hold on. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so all right, I need to move my thing out of the way. Okay. Are you guys able to see my screen? Yes. Okay. I see a thumbs up, Mona. Thank you. Okay. So some of these are sort of low-hanging fruit and repetition of what I said, but I'm going to start with number 2 that says focus on ability and anticipate differences. It is really, really important to make sure that we figure out how we're going as a community to communicate, that we see you, we want to see you, we want you to be here. There's some, I made a slide of example language, right? Things that can be on flyers, things that can be in, like I said, Likrat Shabbat, or other, but messaging is really, really important. That really demonstrates that value of we want to be inclusive of everyone. So some of the things that we talked about before was, invite a speaker, which you did tonight, but like I'm saying, there are tremendous, opportunities, I think, whether it's Zoom or in person, to not just focus on this in February, but, a real emphasis on this would be a game changer, because once you demonstrate that this is, part of your programmatic like DNA, people are going to feel more comfortable asking for what they need or talking openly and making suggestions. I have a bullet on this, piece here that says write about inclusion. It's the second to last bullet point, but writing about inclusion, is the same as what I was saying was anyone can talk about this, anyone can write about this. The more that we do talk about this and write about this, the more the community will start to feel that shift. I gave you guys I highlighted a couple of these, but the first bullet point of the feedback loop and decision-making really touches upon what I said before about making sure that lay and professionals are constantly talking about this and are in communication with, the general community and what can be done to be more supportive. I know for a fact that, the images that we see impact the way that we think. And so there should be an effort moving forward to make sure that there are, people with either visible disabilities or somebody maybe using a certain kind of device or something, to make sure that it's conveyed, even in children's books that are available in the library or in the back of the sanctuary, that, people with disabilities are here and they're seen. Okay, one of my favorite things to recommend for sort of where we go from here, and I realize we're running short on time, but it's really important to make sure that all the professionals initially, and then we'll expand to others in the shul, but that there's training, and really, really good awareness. And again, like I was saying before, sort of knowing where to turn, where the resources are, who the resources are. And again, I would reiterate that selecting a person, and it could change from program to program. It doesn't have to be one person who's the contact person for the entire shul, but for everything that goes on. But it needs to be a priority, that it is clear if I need something, I can go somewhere and to someone specifically. There are really great resources to analyze, the actual layout and accessibility of the shul. One of my favorite colleagues is a woman by the name of Rebecca Winetic. She runs something called Metro West Able. It's out of the Federation of Metro West. And she created like an assessment just for synagogues about how to like walk around and really assess if your shul is fully accessible. Because I know that you guys have done a lot of work on this, and I'm sure there are a few things here and there that, could use a fresh set of eyes, let's say it that way. So I'm going to get to my final slide and everybody will have access to these slides. There are other resources that I would highly recommend, particularly to the Inclusion Committee, to look into. I don't know how many people have heard of Respectability, but they have a phenomenal speakers bureau. And so I would recommend, getting in touch with them. I put on here that Gateways that I was just talking about with Mona, that is headquartered in Boston, several years ago came out with, for purchase, a Haggadah that was mostly with, it was a lot of pictures, so that there's a lot of, it's the telling of the story, but with more like icons and things like that. I know you guys are all familiar with, well, most of you, with Ramah, but what I will say is Ramah has done an excellent job, the TICFA network, of creating resources and connecting people throughout the entire year. So they have some really great things that don't just relate to camp, but that relate to other aspects of Jewish life. And in case no one knows, we have a lot of resources that are both free and downloadable, and a handful that are that we created that are for purchase. So I'm gonna stop my share. Let's see. Okay, so let me see.
I'm on mute.
Lived experiences, yes. So that's the last thing that I would say is, I think that so Jackie put into the chat an issue that I really do feel strongly about, and that is involving people and giving airtime and the opportunity to speak or write to people who have lived some of these experiences. When I spoke with Toby and Lisa, I was so excited that Lisa was going to give a Devar Torah that was then published about inclusion. But I said to them, the next stage is to get people to be, transparent and a little vulnerable with their own experiences. That's like a whole other level of sharing and connecting and belonging, quite frankly, knowing that I'm going to say what I need to say, and I'm not going to be judged for it. I'm going to be, loved because of it, not treated any differently. Okay.
That's also a
So-
good principle for the focus groups we might hold, for example, on services for those with cognitive issues, that including individuals, services we might hold, or other programming we might hold for individuals with autism is to make an effort to have self-advocates involved. So thank you.
Right. I saw, Lisa, you
So-
wrote in the chat, nothing about us without us. That's like that's the ultimate thing is don't plan a program that you think is going to work. Ask what will work and then plan. Yes.
So I just want to say that it's a good sign when you go past the time that you had down that you're going to stop. I think that's like really a wonderful sign that it's been such a interesting program. I want to thank Lisa so much. I want to thank Dori for your knowledge, for how interesting and how personable both of you are in making this program so not only interesting and meaningful and useful. You've given us so many additional ideas, and I want to say I've been around a long time, and I was around at Schechter when they started their program, when they were just talking, and so was Rachel. I don't know if she's still on, Rachel David, when they were just talking about starting their special needs program, when they hardly had anything, and yet look at what's happened. So you have to start somewhere.
That's right.
And we have started. And Peter just asked me, how are people going to know that it's okay to say what they need? How are people at Beth Shalom going to know this is what I need? It's okay to ask. The synagogue is interested. And I said, the way is having a program like this, having Lisa give a Dvar Torah, having it be in the air, having there be a notice with every program, let us know if you need something, and contact a person.
Mhm.
The more we do that kind of thing, the more people know. And the more people know that we're a synagogue that wants them to be a part of us and to be a really have a seat at our table at Beth Shalom. I think that's accurate. And I believe we have started. And thank you for our next step story. And thank you, Lisa, for everything. And Abby, for your help. And thank you, everyone, for coming and your excellent questions.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Toby, for being the engine behind all of this. So
Well,
thank you.
There are other people. I have to thank Elaine Cohn. But I'm really very, feel really encouraged, and it's been wonderful working on this.
Yes.
Hey,
thank you.
everyone. Is there
Bye.
anybody who has a word they want to say? Otherwise, we're going to sign off. Good night. Thank you.